The morning sun cast long shadows across the remote military training facility in Nevada. Commander Jake Morrison stood behind a line of 13 elite sharpshooters, each one handpicked from different branches of the military. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the best of the best. Men who had proven themselves in countless missions across hostile territories. The target sat 4,000 meters away, a distance that would challenge even the most skilled marksman. At this range, wind patterns, temperature, humidity, and even the Earth's rotation could affect a bullet's path. The target itself was barely visible to the naked eye, requiring powerful scopes and years of training to hit accurately. "Gentlemen," Morrison announced, his voice carrying across the firing range, "today's exercise will test every skill you've developed. The target is a standard military silhouette at 4,000 meters. You have one shot each. Make it count." The first shooter, Sergeant Mike Chen from the Army's elite sniper division, took his position. He had over 200 confirmed kills in Afghanistan and was known for his steady hands and sharp eyes. Chen adjusted his rifle scope, calculated the wind speed using a small handheld device, and controlled his breathing. The silence on the range was absolute as he squeezed the trigger. The bullet traveled for what seemed like an eternity before hitting the dirt embankment 50 meters short of the target. Chen's face showed disappointment, but he maintained his professional composure. He had trained for situations like this, where environmental factors could turn even the most skilled shooter into an ordinary person. Next came Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from the Marines. His reputation preceded him. 3 tours in Iraq, numerous commendations for marksmanship, and a record that spoke of unwavering precision under pressure. Rodriguez spent extra time studying the wind flags positioned along the range. He made minute adjustments to his scope and settled into his shooting position. His shot rang out across the desert, but the spotter's call confirmed another miss. The bullet had sailed wide to the left, caught by a crosswind that had shifted at the last moment. Rodriguez shook his head, knowing that at this distance, even the smallest miscalculation could mean failure. One by one, the elite marksmen took their turns. Each brought years of experience, advanced training, and proven track records. There was Thompson from the Air Force, who had spent countless hours in precision shooting competitions. Williams from the Special Forces, whose calm demeanor had served him well in high-pressure combat situations. Jackson from the Navy's Special Operations Unit, known for his ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. Each shooter approached the challenge with confidence, using different techniques and equipment. Some relied on advanced ballistic calculators, others trusted their instincts developed through years in the field. A few made adjustments based on the previous shooter's attempts, trying to learn from the misses and apply that knowledge to their own shots. But as the morning progressed, the target remained untouched. The desert heat began to create additional challenges, with heat waves distorting vision through the scopes. The wind continued to shift unpredictably, making calculations increasingly difficult. What had started as a confident group of elite soldiers gradually became a collection of frustrated professionals facing a humbling reality. Morrison watched each attempt with growing concern. These men represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship training. If they couldn't hit the target, it raised serious questions about the feasibility of long-range operations at such distances. The exercise was supposed to validate new equipment and techniques, but instead, it was revealing the limitations of even the most skilled personnel. By noon, 11 of the 13 shooters had taken their turns. The last 2 remaining were among the most decorated marksmen in their respective units. The pressure was mounting, not just from the challenge itself, but from the knowledge that their peers, men they respected and competed with, had all failed. The 12th shooter, Captain Brooks from Delta Force, had a reputation for making impossible shots. His colleagues often joked that he could hit a target blindfolded. Brooks took his time, studying every detail of the range conditions. He consulted multiple weather instruments, made complex calculations, and even waited for what he believed would be the most favorable wind conditions. When Brooks finally took his shot, the crack of the rifle echoed across the range with authority. For a moment, there was hope among the observers, but the spotter's call confirmed what many had begun to expect: another miss. The bullet had come closer than most. But close wasn't good enough in the world of precision shooting. The 13th and final shooter was Master Sergeant Davis, a legend in Army sniper circles. With over 3 decades of military service, Davis had trained many of the shooters who had already attempted the shot. His experience spanned multiple conflicts, and his knowledge of ballistics was encyclopedic. If anyone could salvage the exercise, it would be Davis. Davis approached his shot with the methodical precision that had made him famous. He spent nearly 20 minutes preparing, checking and rechecking every variable. The wind, the temperature, the humidity, the angle of the sun, everything was considered and calculated. When he finally squeezed the trigger, there was a sense that this shot carried the hopes and reputations of all 13 marksmen. The bullet's flight seemed to last forever in the desert silence. Every eye was trained on the distant target, every breath held in anticipation. But when the spotter made his call, the reality was the same as the previous 12 attempts. Another miss. Even Davis, with all his experience and legendary skill, had been defeated by the 4,000-meter challenge. As the dust settled and the echo of the final shot faded away, Commander Morrison faced an uncomfortable truth. His elite team, the best marksmen the military had to offer, had all failed at a distance that might be required in future operations. The exercise had revealed a significant gap in capability, one that could have serious implications for mission planning and operational effectiveness. The debriefing room felt heavy with disappointment as Commander Morrison addressed the 13 marksmen. Maps covered the walls, showing various operational theaters where long-range precision might be crucial. The failed exercise had implications beyond just training. It could affect how future missions were planned and executed. Today's results are concerning, Morrison began, his tone serious but not accusatory. We need to understand what went wrong and how we can improve. The 4,000-meter challenge isn't just an academic exercise. Intelligence suggests that future operations may require engagement at these extreme distances. The shooters sat silently, each reviewing their performance and trying to understand where they had miscalculated. These were men accustomed to success, and failure didn't sit easily with any of them. They had spent years perfecting their craft, only to be humbled by distance and environmental factors they couldn't quite master. Sergeant Chen spoke first. The wind patterns were unlike anything I've encountered. The shifts were too rapid and unpredictable. My calculations were based on standard models, but the desert conditions created variables we haven't trained for. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodded in agreement. The heat distortion was worse than expected. Even with the best optics, the target seemed to dance through the scope. It's like trying to hit a moving target that isn't actually moving. Captain Brooks added his perspective. The ballistic drop at that distance exceeds our standard training parameters. We've all hit targets at 2,500 to 3,000 meters. But adding that extra 1,000 meters creates exponential increases in difficulty. Every small error gets magnified tremendously. Morrison listened to each analysis, taking notes and asking detailed questions. The feedback painted a picture of a challenge that pushed beyond current training standards and equipment capabilities. It wasn't a matter of skill or dedication. These men had proven both repeatedly. Instead, it seemed they had reached the practical limits of conventional marksmanship techniques. "There's someone I want you to meet," Morrison said, pressing a button on his phone. "She's been observing today's exercise." A few minutes later, the door opened quietly, and a woman entered the room. She was shorter than most of the men present, with an athletic build that spoke of serious physical conditioning. What was immediately striking wasn't her appearance, but her presence. She moved with the fluid confidence of someone completely comfortable in their own abilities. She wore standard Navy fatigues with minimal insignia, but those who knew military protocol could identify the subtle markers of special operations. Her boots were well worn, suggesting extensive field experience. Most notably, she carried herself with the quiet authority that only came from proven performance under pressure. "This is Chief Petty Officer Sarah Martinez," Morrison announced. "Navy SEAL, Special Operations Sniper, and someone who has successfully engaged targets at distances exceeding 4,000 meters in operational environments." The room fell silent. Women had only recently been allowed to attempt SEAL training, and the physical and mental demands had meant very few had successfully completed the program. To have one sitting in their midst, especially one with apparent expertise in their specialty, was unexpected and impressive. Martinez didn't speak immediately. Instead, she studied each man in the room with the calm assessment of someone who had sized up allies and enemies in life-threatening situations. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured and clear. "I watched your attempts today," she said simply. "You're all skilled marksmen. Your techniques are sound, your equipment is excellent, and your dedication is obvious. But you're approaching the 4,000-meter shot using methods designed for shorter ranges." She moved to the wall map, pointing to various terrain features marked around the training facility. At extreme distances, traditional marksmanship becomes inadequate. You need to think like the environment, not fight against it. The wind, temperature, and humidity aren't obstacles to overcome. They're tools to utilize. Master Sergeant Davis, the most experienced shooter in the room, leaned forward with interest. "What do you mean by think like the environment?" Martinez pulled out a small, worn notebook filled with handwritten observations and calculations. Every location has its own personality. This desert facility has wind patterns that follow the terrain features. The temperature gradients create predictable distortion zones. Most importantly, there are microclimates at different points along the bullet's flight path. She opened the notebook, revealing detailed sketches and measurements that went far beyond standard ballistic calculations. The pages showed wind roses, temperature maps, and timing charts that tracked environmental changes throughout different times of day and seasons. "I've been studying this range for the past month," Martinez continued. "Not just the target area, but every meter between the firing position and the target. I've mapped the wind currents, identified temperature zones, and tracked how conditions change minute by minute throughout the day." The sophistication of her preparation was immediately apparent to the experienced marksman. This wasn't just advanced planning. It was the kind of thorough intelligence gathering that special operations personnel applied to mission-critical situations. Sergeant Chen asked, "How long did it take you to develop this level of environmental understanding?" "For this specific range, about 30 days of observation and testing," Martinez replied. "But the methodology took years to develop. Each new environment requires fresh analysis, but the principles remain consistent." The Bluvnant. Morrison watched the interaction with growing confidence. "Chief Martinez has volunteered to attempt the 4,000-meter shot tomorrow morning, using her environmental approach. Whether she succeeds or fails, we'll all learn something valuable." Rodriguez looked skeptical but respectful. "What makes you think you can succeed where 13 of us failed?" Martinez closed her notebook and met his gaze directly. "I don't think anything. I've observed, calculated, and prepared. Tomorrow will demonstrate whether my methods are effective or if I need to refine my approach further." Her response impressed the group. There was no boasting, no claims of superior ability, just the quiet confidence of someone who had done their homework thoroughly. Captain Brooks found himself curious about her background and training methods. "What's different about SEAL sniper training that gives you this environmental focus?" Brooks asked. "SEAL operations often require adaptation to completely unknown environments, with minimal preparation time," Martinez explained. "We learn to read terrain and weather patterns quickly because our lives depend on it. Long-range shooting in special operations isn't just about hitting a target. It's about understanding and utilizing every aspect of the environment to accomplish the mission." As the meeting concluded, the 13 marksmen found themselves looking forward to the next day's demonstration. Whether Martinez succeeded or failed, her approach represented a fundamentally different way of thinking about extreme-range marksmanship that could revolutionize their training and operational capabilities. Dawn approached the firing range with unusual anticipation. Word of the female SEAL's planned attempt had spread quietly through the facility, drawing observers who wouldn't normally attend a routine marksmanship exercise. The story of 13 elite failures, followed by an outsider's confidence, had created a buzz of curiosity and skepticism. Martinez arrived at the range 2 hours before the scheduled demonstration. While others might have used this time for last-minute equipment checks or mental preparation, she instead began what appeared to be a systematic observation routine. She moved methodically along the firing line, spending several minutes at different positions, taking notes, and occasionally holding up strips of lightweight fabric to test air movement. Commander Morrison watched her preparation with growing interest. This wasn't the rushed final checks he had observed from yesterday's shooters. Instead, Martinez was conducting what appeared to be a fresh environmental assessment, as if the previous month of observation was just the foundation for real-time analysis. She carried a different rifle than the standard-issue weapons used by the other marksmen. It was clearly military grade, but with modifications that weren't immediately recognizable. The scope was larger and more complex than typical sniper optics, and additional instruments were mounted alongside the barrel in configurations that suggested specialized purposes. "That's an interesting setup," Master Sergeant Davis commented as he approached Morrison. "I've never seen that particular combination of equipment." She requested permission to use her personal rifle and optics, Morrison replied. "Everything has been inspected and approved. But you're right, it's definitely not standard issue." As the official start time approached, the 13 marksmen from the previous day gathered alongside other observers. There was a mixture of professional curiosity and wounded pride among the group. Each man hoped to learn something valuable, but also harbored doubts about whether different equipment and techniques could overcome the fundamental challenge that had defeated them all. Martinez completed her environmental assessment and returned to the primary firing position. She set up her rifle with methodical precision, but her setup process was noticeably different from conventional approaches. Instead of immediately aligning with the target, she spent considerable time adjusting her position relative to terrain features and wind indicators. "She's not even looking at the target yet," Sergeant Chen observed quietly to Rodriguez. "Every shooter I know starts by establishing target alignment." Rodriguez nodded, equally puzzled. "Maybe SEAL training emphasizes different priorities. But eventually, you have to aim at what you're trying to hit." Martinez continued her preparation for nearly 20 minutes, making adjustments that seemed to consider factors beyond direct target alignment. She consulted her notebook frequently, cross-referencing written observations with current conditions. Occasionally, she would pause and simply observe, as if waiting for something specific. Finally, she settled into a shooting position. But even then, her approach differed from standard techniques. Instead of immediately acquiring the target through her scope, she spent several minutes in what appeared to be meditation or deep concentration. Her breathing became controlled and rhythmic, and her entire body seemed to relax into complete stillness. Captain Brooks found the extended preparation fascinating rather than excessive. In special operations, he knew that patience and thorough preparation often made the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. If Martinez needed this much time to properly set up her shot, it suggested a level of precision that went beyond conventional training. When Martinez finally began to engage with her rifle scope, her movements were fluid and confident. She made a series of adjustments that seemed to follow a predetermined sequence rather than reactive calculations. It was clear that much of her targeting solution had been worked out in advance, with the scope adjustments simply implementing pre-planned corrections. The observers fell silent as Martinez settled into her final shooting position. Unlike the previous day's shooters, who had shown visible tension and concentration, Martinez appeared completely relaxed. Her breathing remained steady. Her grip on the rifle was firm but not rigid, and her entire demeanor suggested someone performing a familiar routine rather than attempting a difficult challenge. Morrison found himself holding his breath as the moment of truth approached. The previous day's failures had raised serious questions about operational capabilities and training effectiveness. Martinez's success or failure would provide important answers about whether extreme-range engagements were practical with current personnel and modified techniques. The wind across the range had picked up slightly compared to the previous day, adding another variable to an already complex shot. Several observers noted this change with concern, knowing that even small increases in wind speed could dramatically affect bullet trajectory at 4,000 meters. Martinez seemed unbothered by the wind change. If anything, she appeared to be waiting for specific wind conditions, rather than fighting against them. Her patience was remarkable, especially considering the pressure of performing in front of professional peers who had all failed at the same challenge. Davis, watching Martinez's technique with decades of experience, began to recognize patterns in her approach that differed fundamentally from conventional training. "She's not fighting the environment," he murmured to Morrison. "She's working with it." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked quietly. "Look at her timing," Davis explained. "She's not trying to shoot despite the wind conditions. She's waiting for the right moment within the wind patterns. It's like she's choreographing the shot with the environment instead of trying to overcome it." This observation began to make sense to the other experienced marksmen. Traditional training emphasized consistency and control, shooting despite environmental factors. Martinez appeared to be using a completely different philosophy that embraced environmental factors as part of the shooting solution. The desert morning continued its gradual warming, creating the heat distortions that had troubled yesterday's shooters. But Martinez's position and timing seemed calculated to minimize these effects. She had chosen not just a physical location, but a specific time when environmental factors would be most favorable for her approach. As she made final preparations, Martinez's confidence was evident but not arrogant. Her movements suggested someone who had done this many times before under various conditions. This wasn't a hopeful attempt based on theory. It was the execution of a proven method adapted to specific environmental conditions. The moment was approaching when Martinez would either validate her claims with successful performance or join the ranks of elite marksmen who had been humbled by the 4,000-meter challenge. Either outcome would provide valuable lessons, but success would revolutionize thinking about extreme range capabilities. Morrison checked his watch, noting that Martinez had been in final preparation for over an hour. This level of patience and methodical preparation was impressive, but it also raised questions about practical application in operational environments where time constraints might not allow such thorough setup. The target sat unchanged in the distance, unmarked by the previous day's attempts. Soon, it would either remain pristine or bear the mark of a shot that demonstrated new possibilities in precision marksmanship. The tension among observers was palpable as they waited to witness history in the making. Martinez continued her patient observation, occasionally glancing at a small device that appeared to be monitoring atmospheric conditions in real time. The device was unlike anything the other marksmen had seen, compact but sophisticated, with multiple sensors that seemed to track variables beyond simple wind speed and direction. "What is that instrument?" Rodriguez whispered to Chen, gesturing toward Martinez's equipment. "Looks like some kind of advanced weather station," Chen replied quietly. "But more detailed than anything I've used. See how she's checking it every few minutes? She's not just measuring current conditions. She's tracking trends and predicting changes." The 13 marksmen watched with growing respect as Martinez demonstrated preparation techniques they had never encountered. Her approach suggested that successful extreme-range shooting required not just marksmanship skills, but also environmental science, meteorology, and careful timing. Martinez made a subtle adjustment to her rifle position, then resumed her patient waiting. The movement was so slight that casual observers might have missed it, but the experienced shooters recognized it as a significant realignment. She wasn't just aiming at the target. She was positioning for conditions that didn't exist yet, but would develop at the precise moment of her shot. Master Sergeant Davis found himself completely absorbed in studying Martinez's technique. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen preparation this thorough or methodical. She's not just shooting at a target, he realized. She's orchestrating the entire engagement. Commander Morrison checked the official timeline. Martinez had been in position for nearly 90 minutes, far longer than any conventional shooting protocol would recommend. Most training emphasized quick target acquisition and timely engagement to minimize the effects of changing conditions. Martinez was doing the opposite, waiting for ideal conditions to develop. Suddenly, Martinez's posture changed slightly. The movement was subtle but unmistakable to trained observers. The shift from preparation to execution. She had apparently identified the environmental window she had been waiting for, and was now moving into the final phase of her attempt. Her breathing pattern changed from the relaxed rhythm of patient waiting to the controlled breathing of precision shooting. Each breath became calculated, designed to achieve perfect stillness at the moment of trigger pull. The transition was so smooth that it seemed like a natural progression rather than a conscious decision. Martinez's finger moved to the trigger with deliberate slowness, Unlike the previous day's shooters, who had shown visible tension during final target acquisition, she remained completely relaxed. Her confidence was evident not in bold gestures, but in the absence of any anxiety or hurry. The observers found themselves unconsciously holding their breath as Martinez entered the final seconds of her preparation. The silence across the range was absolute, broken only by the subtle sounds of desert wind moving across the terrain. Even the facility's normal background noise seemed to have quieted in anticipation. Through her scope, Martinez made final micro-adjustments that were invisible to observers but clearly part of her pre-planned sequence. Every movement appeared purposeful and calculated, suggesting that much of her targeting solution had been worked out during her extended preparation period. The moment stretched with anticipation as Martinez achieved perfect stillness. Her rifle remained rock steady, aligned with whatever targeting solution she had calculated. The waiting had been long and methodical, but the actual shooting phase was demonstrating the fluid precision of well-rehearsed technique. Without warning or fanfare, Martinez squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack of the rifle shot echoed across the desert range, followed immediately by the distinctive whistle of a bullet traveling at high velocity. The sound carried clearly in the desert air, and experienced ears could detect the clean, unobstructed flight that suggested proper barrel alignment and optimal ballistic conditions. For several long seconds, silence returned to the range as the bullet traveled the 4,000-meter distance. At that extreme range, even a bullet traveling at over 2,500 feet per second required noticeable flight time. The observers watched the distant target area through binoculars and spotting scopes, waiting for the impact that would determine success or failure. Morrison held his breath, knowing that Martinez's performance would have implications far beyond a single training exercise. If she succeeded, it would validate new approaches to extreme-range marksmanship that could revolutionize military capabilities. If she failed, it would confirm that the 4,000-meter challenge exceeded practical human capabilities regardless of technique. The spotters positioned near the target area maintained professional silence, taking time to make accurate assessments before making any announcements. At 4,000 meters, even experienced observers needed time to properly evaluate impact results, especially when determining precise hit locations on small targets. Davis found himself analyzing the shot acoustically, using decades of experience to interpret the sounds of bullet flight and impact. The initial crack had been clean, suggesting optimal muzzle velocity and trajectory. The flight sound had remained consistent, indicating stable bullet rotation and minimal atmospheric interference. Then came the distant sound that every marksman hoped to hear, the unmistakable impact of bullet striking target. It was faint but clearly audible to trained ears, carrying across the desert with the authority of successful precision shooting. The radio crackled to life as the official spotter near the target made his assessment. Range control. This is Target Observer 1. Stand by for impact assessment. The pause seemed to last forever, as the spotter conducted his evaluation through high-powered optics. Every person on the firing line waited for the call that would either validate Martinez's claims or add her name to the list of skilled marksmen defeated by extreme range. Range control. The spotter's voice came clearly over the radio. Target Observer 1 reports. Direct hit, center mass. Repeat. Direct hit, center mass. Target is marked. The silence that followed was profound. 13 elite marksmen had failed at the exact same challenge that Martinez had just conquered with apparent ease. The implications were staggering, not just for individual pride, but for understanding the limits and possibilities of human marksmanship capability. Morrison felt a mixture of relief and amazement. The exercise had achieved its ultimate goal of testing extreme range capabilities, but the results raised as many questions as they answered. How had Martinez succeeded where others failed? Were her techniques teachable to other marksmen? Most importantly, could these methods be applied in operational environments? The 13 marksmen stood in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. Their failure the previous day had been difficult to accept, but Martinez's success forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about precision shooting at extreme ranges. Rodriguez was the first to speak, his voice carrying genuine admiration. That was incredible. I've never seen preparation that thorough or execution that confident. She made it look effortless. Chen nodded in agreement. his analytical mind already working to understand the differences between Martinez's approach and their own. The environmental analysis, the timing, the equipment modifications. Everything was different from our standard techniques. She wasn't just shooting better. She was shooting completely differently. Martinez remained in position, conducting what appeared to be post-shot analysis using her advanced instruments. Even after achieving success, she continued gathering data and making observations. The shot wasn't just an end result for her. It was part of an ongoing learning process about extreme range marksmanship. Martinez finally rose from her shooting position, her movements calm and methodical even after achieving what had seemed impossible just moments before. She began packing her specialized equipment with the same careful attention she had shown during setup, treating each instrument as a valuable tool rather than simple gear. Commander Morrison approached with a mixture of amazement and professional curiosity. "Chief Martinez, that was extraordinary. I think everyone here would benefit from understanding how you achieved what 13 elite marksmen couldn't accomplish." Martinez finished securing her rifle before responding. When she spoke, her tone was matter-of-fact, without any hint of boasting or false modesty. The shot succeeded because the preparation was thorough. Success at extreme range isn't about superior marksmanship. It's about superior environmental analysis and timing. Master Sergeant Davis stepped forward, his decades of experience compelling him to understand the techniques he had witnessed. "Your preparation was unlike anything I've seen in 30 years of military service. Can you explain your methodology?" "The fundamental difference is treating the environment as an ally rather than an obstacle," Martinez explained, pulling out her worn notebook. "Traditional training teaches shooters to overcome environmental factors through calculation and compensation. My approach integrates with environmental patterns to find optimal shooting windows." She opened the notebook to pages filled with detailed observations about the training facility. Wind roses showed prevailing patterns at different times of day. Temperature maps indicated how thermal currents affected bullet trajectory. Most importantly, timing charts tracked when conditions aligned to create brief windows of optimal shooting conditions. Sergeant Chen studied the notebook with growing amazement. "This is meteorology-level analysis. How long did it take you to develop these observation skills?" "Years," Martinez replied simply. "SEAL operations often require engaging targets in completely unknown environments with minimal preparation time. I learned to read terrain and weather patterns quickly because mission success depended on environmental adaptation." She pointed to specific entries in her notebook that related to the morning's conditions. "Today's shot succeeded because I identified a 15-minute window when wind patterns, temperature gradients, and atmospheric pressure would align optimally. The extended preparation time was spent waiting for that window to develop." Captain Brooks found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about precision shooting. "You're saying you didn't overcome the environmental challenges. You waited until they became advantages?" "Exactly," Martinez confirmed. "The desert morning creates predictable thermal patterns. Wind currents follow terrain features in consistent ways. Instead of fighting these factors, I planned the shot for when they would naturally align to assist bullet trajectory, rather than hinder it." Quote. Rodriguez looked at the advanced weather monitoring device Martinez had used during her preparation. "That equipment is clearly specialized beyond standard military issue. Is that technology available to other units?" "Some of it is commercially available, though expensive," Martinez explained. "Other components I modified myself based on specific requirements for environmental monitoring. But the real advancement isn't the equipment. It's the methodology for using environmental data effectively." Morrison began to understand the broader implications of what he had witnessed. "You're describing an entirely different approach to long-range marksmanship. Instead of trying to achieve consistency despite environmental factors, you're working with environmental variability to find optimal moments for engagement. Traditional training emphasizes consistency because it works well at shorter ranges," Martinez agreed. "But at extreme distances, environmental factors become so significant that fighting them becomes counterproductive. Success requires partnership with the environment, rather than dominance over it." Davis asked the question that was troubling all the elite marksmen present. "Can these techniques be taught to other shooters? Or do they require specialized background and experience?" Martinez considered the question carefully before responding. The basic principles can be taught, but effective application requires developing environmental intuition that goes beyond standard marksmanship training. It means learning meteorology, terrain analysis, and timing, in addition to shooting skills. She gestured toward the distant target, now marked with her successful shot. That hit wasn't achieved through superior shooting technique. My trigger control, breathing, and rifle handling weren't necessarily better than yours. The difference was understanding when and how to shoot, not just where to aim. The 13 marksmen exchanged glances, each processing the implications of Martinez's explanation. Their training had focused on perfecting shooting mechanics and overcoming environmental challenges through calculation and willpower. Martinez had demonstrated a completely different philosophy that embraced environmental factors as integral parts of the shooting solution. Chen spoke thoughtfully. This explains why all our attempts failed, despite excellent technique. We were all fighting the same environmental conditions, instead of waiting for favorable conditions to develop. The desert creates challenging conditions for most of each day, Martinez confirmed. But there are brief periods when thermal patterns, wind currents, and atmospheric pressure align to create windows of opportunity. Successful extreme-range shooting means identifying and utilizing those windows. Morrison began considering the practical applications of Martinez's approach. In operational environments, would there always be time for this level of environmental analysis and patient timing? That depends on mission parameters, Martinez replied. Some situations require immediate engagement, regardless of environmental conditions. Others allow for optimal timing. The key is understanding when each approach is appropriate and having the skills to execute either option effectively. She packed the last of her specialized instruments, then addressed the group of marksmen who had gathered around her. Your technical skills are excellent. With additional training in environmental analysis and timing, any of you could achieve similar results. The question is whether military training programs are willing to expand beyond traditional marksmanship instruction. Rodriguez found himself excited about the possibilities Martinez had demonstrated. How would someone begin developing these environmental reading skills? Start by observing, Martinez suggested. Spend time understanding how weather patterns affect your local training ranges. Learn to read terrain features and how they influence wind currents. Most importantly, develop patience. Successful extreme-range shooting often requires waiting for optimal conditions, rather than forcing shots in suboptimal circumstances. Brooks looked toward the target area where Martinez's bullet had found its mark. What you've accomplished today will change how we think about long-range capabilities. The implications for mission planning and operational effectiveness are significant. Martinez nodded acknowledgement, then began walking toward the range exit. Her demonstration was complete. But she had left behind more than just a successful target engagement. She had introduced concepts that would require the elite marksmen to reconsider their training, their techniques, and their understanding of what was possible in precision shooting. As she departed, the 13 marksmen remained behind, discussing among themselves the revolutionary approach they had witnessed. Each man recognized that Martinez had not just succeeded where they had failed. She had revealed an entirely new dimension of marksmanship that could transform their capabilities if they were willing to embrace fundamental changes in their methods. 6 months after Martinez's demonstration, the military training facility in Nevada had become the center of a revolution in long-range marksmanship instruction. Commander Morrison stood in the same briefing room where the 13 elite marksmen had first met Martinez, but everything had changed dramatically. The walls now displayed detailed environmental maps of training ranges across multiple facilities. Weather monitoring equipment had been installed at various points along shooting ranges to provide real-time data about atmospheric conditions. Most significantly, the training curriculum had been completely restructured to incorporate environmental analysis alongside traditional marksmanship instruction. Master Sergeant Davis, now serving as the senior instructor for the new Extreme Range program, addressed a class of advanced marksmen from various military branches. Environmental partnership represents a fundamental shift in how we approach precision shooting, he explained, gesturing toward complex charts, showing wind patterns and thermal currents. The students in his class included some of the 13 original marksmen who had failed the 4,000-meter challenge. Over the past months, they had undergone intensive retraining that combined their existing skills with Martinez's environmental methodology. The transformation in their capabilities had been remarkable. Sergeant Chen, now qualified as an environmental analysis instructor, worked with students on interpreting atmospheric data from advanced monitoring equipment. Success at extreme range requires reading the environment like a language, he told his students. Every change in wind speed, temperature, and pressure tells a story about optimal shooting conditions. The specialized equipment Martinez had used was now standard issue for extreme range operations. Military procurement had worked with manufacturers to produce environmental monitoring systems specifically designed for precision shooting applications.